Thank you.
You too.
All right, let's meet our guests on set. David Mercer, Democratic strategist, who often joins us from inside the box and inside the Beltway, is outside the satellite box and right on set.
Good to be with you today.
Glad to have you. Thank you for being here.
Sure.
And Dan Halloran is a New York City councilman. And he's just informed me. Do you mind if I just share some of this bio that you had? By the way, this was not on his actual bio that was handed to me to prepare for today's show. But what he told me is so interesting. Here in New York, you want to talk about a minority of Republican representation here. You said that the population is made up of what, 35%?
35% Republicans.
Identified Republicans.
Yep.
And you are on a council, New York councilman, with 51 other members, right?
Yep.
Or 51 members.
That's
and
right.
how many GOP are there?
There are 5.
That's not even 10%.
Nope.
What happened?
It's called how you cut a district line.
But David, you said...
I said it's voter preference.
To which you say?
We better look at the records and the rolls and just see how you split them up. Every district in the city, I'm in one of the best, 3-to-1 Democrat to Republican, the way the district's been cut. So if voter preference goes along with registration, he's absolutely right. However, if it goes along with how you cut out populations to ensure the Republicans don't have seats, that's a different story.
And across the country, that is going to be, in fact, going into 2012 on redistricting is going to be a huge issue. And I think there'll be gains and losses on both sides as both the census has movement among the populations, but also with state legislators or state legislation, state houses and governors' mansions have switch. The advantage could fall to, in a lot of states, to Republicans who will be drawing the lines with those majorities in the state houses and among governor majorities. So
wow, that's an honest look ahead. So
it's a challenge. It's a practical one.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, but there's a lot of talk.
No.
There's a lot of talk of independent redistricting, and if we could really get truly independent redistricting, that would be great. My district is 3-to-1 because they couldn't gerrymander it. I'm up against the Sound on the north side and Nassau County and on the east side, so there's really no way to do.
Which is a former D'Amato stronghold. He's a beneficiary of D'Amato.
What that means is you're up against a whole lot, a big body of water.
That's
which
right.
There are no voters out there except for the people on a few sailboats.
That's right.
And then what's on the other
Nassau
side?
County.
Okay.
So basically, there's nowhere for them to sort of finagle a district that wouldn't be obviously.
Well, it's also got a legacy with Senator D'Amato being out of Nassau County as well, which during his period led to a lot of GOP registration. My cousins, being Democrats, were from Nassau County.
There you go. There you go.
Interesting. Okay. Well, I'm glad that we got to kind of talk about this because I think as we go forward, as you pointed out, David, this will be an issue ahead. But you're living it right now, Dan, which I find fascinating. Let's talk about Wisconsin. Because
why not?
The pictures out of Wisconsin
What's not to talk about in Wisconsin
are starting to look like really they're giving away food or something in Wisconsin. I mean, there are so many people who are showing up on both sides of the issue now. And the issue, as we frame it, is do you really want to pay the union legacy and entitlements for teachers and other workers? Do you really want that burden and to take basically product away from students, so on and so forth, and food out of the mouths of people across the state if you cannot continue to tax people at a rate that takes care of all those legacy payments? Or do you want to wipe that away and try and negotiate a new deal with school districts and other unions across the state of Wisconsin and maybe plan for a future that has a whole lot less spending with regard to legacy?
I take your last point very seriously, Harris, and something I'm not sure the governor in Wisconsin is, and that is negotiating shared sacrifice. Rather than negotiating with teachers, firefighters, and all those that are providing services to the government of Wisconsin and its people. Instead, he is using the economic situation that we're in to instead remove their right to collective bargaining to, in fact, negotiate those cuts. And that, I think, is where the problem is, and we might see where the governor has maybe bit off more than he can chew, where he's trying to address fiscal restraints, which everybody's got to do, but instead decide to throw collective bargaining into the mix, which has awakened the big tiger on this one, and that's why you see people taking to the streets.
The big tiger? You mean the Democrats who refuse to go and do their jobs?
No, I'm talking about the people who are in threat of losing their collective bargaining. The teachers, the firefighters, the cops, everybody who just got told that they will no longer have collective bargaining, their right to negotiate with their employer as to what cuts will take place. It's happening in Michigan. Snyder has negotiated.
Next in Ohio.
But Schneider's approach is a little different, and you're right on that front. Schneider is not willing to take collective bargaining off the table there. Of course, he's proposing some drastic cuts and is looking to make the unions come to the table to negotiate.
As it should be.
The problem with some of the collective bargaining agreements is the binding arbitration components. And as all of us know in New York State, we've had some huge problems where arbitrators have been able to impose decisions which both sides weren't in agreement on. And that's not really what you call contract negotiation. And that's the problem. Michigan doesn't have the same issues of binding arbitration that we have here in New York that are similar to what is going on in Wisconsin. When you have these binding arbitration agreements, it doesn't matter what the municipality can or can't afford, and it doesn't matter what the unions do or don't want. Some third party is going to make that decision unilaterally if he can't force them to agree. That shouldn't be how it is. We should all come to the table, and if we're really talking about agreement, then we should sit down, hammer it out, and no one leaves until we come to an agreement together.
Couldn't agree with you more, but that's not happening in Wisconsin today. Right now it's in the streets. He's going to need to bring it back in.
A possible ripple effect. And I want to draw everybody's attention to the front page of FoxNews.com. The president, Hal, has jumped into this whole union fray, which puts a whole different level on top of it. It's kind of like what we saw with the situation here on the East Coast when Professor Gates was having his problems with the local authorities and them coming to. They probably could have worked that out without a beer summit.
Right, but it had to be because once he entered the picture,
once he was in the picture,
it takes
was
all.
So what happens with this?
Well, the president's first of all overstepping his bounds. All due respect to the president. This is the governor of the state of Wisconsin. It is for the Senate and the Assembly of Wisconsin and the governor of that state to determine what its civil service plan is. I don't care, what version of federalism you subscribe to. At the end of the day, it is not the role of the chief executive of the United States to tell the governor how to conduct the business of his state.
But let's be clear, okay, and look at his words. He says it looks like an assault on labor unions.
Yeah, what does that mean?
He is not telling, and that's why I'm here, hopefully to clarify.
Oh, okay.
And that is.
Wait, you're going to clarify for the president?
I am going to clarify what his statement was, which is to say.
That's nice of you, because I think he's hired people to do that.
We have a lot of czars that are going to get eliminated this way.
Which is to say that it looks like an assault. It's a commentary.
What does that mean?
It is not a directive to the governor as to what he should do or how he should conduct his business. Let's not take
what does it mean?
What does that mean?
When the president speaks, the president speaks.
To me, it looks like what it is, which is that it is an assault on those members, public service employees who are part of a union, whose collective bargaining rights have been taken off the table and have no say on what the negotiated line is going to be as to how we cut budgets in the state. And without that, they're saying we're going to tell you what the deal is. You have no say in this.
All right.
That is not something that is, one, history, and two, is being used when we're in a weakened economic situation. He's throwing in more or trying to take more from public employees than just their reduced cost for the state to go on.
Here's my point. And boy, I tell you, you got talking points and filibuster down. You get an A. David Mercer, the new clarification czar.
Okay, now we're going to czars, right?
Isn't Congress in the process right now defunding all the czars, so you won't get paid, but you can do it for free. You can do it for free. You can do it for free. It'll be a public service.
For the love of the office.
That's it. That's it. Public service.
But here's my point with the question. It isn't so much, can you tell me what he meant? It is, can you tell me why he's in this? Because what this does is it puts the conversation on a different level, and it makes it more, which we love in the media, because it makes it more of a national story.
And it should be a national story because it's happening in states around the country. country. All of this is happening.
This isn't going to stop it. Him wading into the issue
but he didn't say in his words. You show me where in his words he says this should stop.
Do you really think this is it from him?
That's up to him. But what he was sending a signal was what we all know, which is it is an assault on labor unions.
Ding salvo.
It's more than just budget cutting and getting things into balance on budget. They're using that to now go into taking people.
Assault.
It is an assault. It is an assault.
When does the federal government stop? When does the federal government reach stop?
Why is it personal?
Because an assault is something that is done from one to another. It's
personal. It's personal.
And the governor is assaulting the rights of labor unions for collective bargaining. Not even labor unions. Public employees are losing their right to negotiate.
Look, I'm fighting in New York City to keep police and fire pensions intact against the governor and a mayor who doesn't want to do it.
And maybe he will be the next senator from New York as a result.
I gotta capture some of these because they're moving fast and furious.
Sure.
David, you're familiar. Dan, I don't know if you're familiar with the live chat that we have going on during the 9 o'clock hour. Sometimes the conversation is driven by the viewers.
Okay.
Oftentimes, as a matter of fact. So what I'm doing is I'm capturing some of that. And you probably saw me fast and furious over here trying to get because I couldn't read the chats for a minute there. They were hidden from the host, which is never a good thing.
No.
But I want to include some of their comments if I can here this morning. Let's see. Susan, put a cork in David. Tarask 1, call out the National Guard and clear the streets, because David says they're in the streets. Donna Newland says call the senators that are not showing up and lose their pay. Cut their pay for today, which I think is interesting.
I think that's a good point, and we haven't seen whether the governor has elected to reduce his own pay and contribute to the budget.
Chris Metzler, who was a guest on yesterday, is now on the live chat.
Oh, no.
Labor unions have assaulted themselves by becoming irrelevant. Let's see. Using his bully pulpit, Brian Conway, New York, on the president. Obama is out of line, Emily Scott says, but that's nothing new.
Can I add something on that one?
An assault on unions? Really? You don't understand the basics of collective bargaining. I'm telling you, our viewers are quite smart. Go ahead.
I was just going to ask, I think it's weird because here we are commenting on what's going on in Wisconsin, but the president can't make a comment. I mean, that's all it is.
I think when the president gets on and says it's an assault, you're in a different sphere. This is the president of the United States. Anything he says, first of all, is going to be a media soundbite, and second of all, is going to carry a lot of weight. And when the president starts talking about interfering in the sense of making a determination as to what's right and wrong in how a state governor runs his operations, look, if the state senators in Wisconsin want to say, I don't agree with this, that's their prerogative. They're elected by the members of Wisconsin to represent them. But when the president injects it, we're on a whole different plateau. And I think that's the problem. Again, the federal government keeps growing and growing. Its reach keeps growing. I mean, I guess under the Commerce Clause, since Wisconsin does business with the other 49 states, it's okay because, the president's going to ultimately say that's what matters.
All right. So how does this one get solved?
I think negotiation. I think on this front, I have to agree. I have to agree with my Democratic friend here.
Are they chicken?
Oh, come on now. Who's chicken? The governor's a little chicken in that he can't go.
That's a fair question. Why aren't they there?
And I'm going to address the fair question and give you a fair answer, and that is, why is he so scared, or why was he so scared to bring labor to the table and their representatives, to bring the Democrats to the table and say, this is my plan? He didn't do that, okay? He just announced as a czar that this is what we're going to do. That is not a dialogue. That's not negotiating, and that's not shared sacrifice. And that is what the governor is going to have to find himself in, the state of mind to send the message to everybody that I'm sorry I may have gone a little too far. Why don't we get under one roof and negotiate this out for the benefit of this state of Wisconsin and the people living there?
Well, I think the thing here is on the one hand, you're right. I don't think cutting anyone out of the dialogue is the appropriate response. We all need to sit down and discuss the huge economic crisis that we're all going to be experiencing, and there's no question about that. But at the end of the day, the governor may well be right. It may be that collective bargaining has to be subject to non-binding arbitration. We must fight this fight And if we're going to have the argument, but not have some independent third party impose its will on the states that are out there. And that includes the federal
government.
I
would add to Dan's point, don't couple fiscal cuts with collective bargaining. And I think that is a lesson to all these other governors that are looking and seeing what Governor Walker's going through. If they want that on their hands, they might want to rethink, and what Dan and I are saying may be a different approach.
Here in New York, making news this morning, and it was one of the first things I said to Dan when I sat down before the show even started. I said, look, I'm reading headlines that a tremendous amount of teachers are going to lose their jobs here in New York because New York taxpayers, and I live in Jersey, and we struggle with the same issue. The taxpayers cannot afford to pay these legacy costs. So rather than getting into the situation that they have in Wisconsin, they're just going to, people are going to lose their jobs in droves here. You're a New York City councilman. What do you tell your constituents?
Well, first thing I tell them is that the governor of the state of New York proposed this budget, and the governor of the state of New York cut education. New York City is facing a $1.8 billion executive budget cut from the governor, our Democratic governor, who's making this request. Now, as a result, we have no choice in the city but to look to what we do. Now, education in New York City is a $22 billion, $22 billion a year.
Yeah, it's like a small country.
It is. And
it's like a big country.
It's the largest district in the country.
It's like a big country.
In fact, New York State's economy is the fourth largest in North America. It goes the government of the United States, the governments of the state of New York and state of California,
and then countries.
And the city of New York, and then Canada. So, this is where we're at. Unfortunately, the teachers, sometimes they get a very bad rap. Their union was a little too aggressive in some places and incurred some wrath. I know last year they pushed to recontrol the Senate. They abandoned some longtime Senate supporters who were Republicans, and now it's come back to bite them because the Senate did, in fact, flip back to the Republican Party, and they didn't get the Democratic majority they wanted. But a lot of them are on the ground trying hard. The problem is the money isn't there, and as you pointed out, New York is the highest taxed state in the union, and New York City is the highest taxed. It's one of only 2 municipalities in the country that has a separate income tax for its citizens.
I know. And if you live in a different state and you make a living here, you pay it.
Absolutely.
There's no way around it.
You can't live in New York on anything that you would be able to live on outside of the city of New York. The cost of living is about 40% higher.
So are you, as a politician in such a popular place to live, afraid people are going to leave? Which means you lose your revenue and you have even less cash to do what you're doing now.
We've seen that exodus. Unfortunately, the problem is we have a great immigrant community that comes into this city and replenishes it. But the problem is the immigrant community comes in at a much lower tax base.
Because you need them to pay taxes.
It stays at a much lower tax base.
I'm not trying to be funny there. I'm being honest.
It's legitimate.
Well, you're also going to see migrations within the state of New York where somebody's going to move to Westchester County rather than be in Manhattan itself, where the tax base or the tax rate is higher, and supposedly the schools will have a lower ratio of teacher to students. So you're going to see shifts, I think, among the demographics of the state of New York.
And that doesn't inure to the benefit of the city at all.
I wondered yesterday, because we talked about this in the newsroom, whether this issue would resonate across the country. And we owe the president a great debt of gratitude for weighing in, because he's made it such a national issue now. People are up in arms about the union issue now. They're more educated about it in the last 24 hours because the president has said that the unions are being assaulted, which normally is a person-on-person crime. That was the point I was making, that it's now personal. So now you have people from all walks of life. And I know, because our live chat is not just, on coast to coast, but it's all the states in between. And it's even our troops serving outside the country are weighing in. Unions don't have rights, JPB 53. Curtis Marsh, no need for National Guard until they start breaking things. Okay, Joe doesn't want me to repeat his last name because he lives in leftist Portland.
Oh, dear.
Which is where the president is apparently today. I'm sorry, Joe, that you shouldn't be hiding.
I don't hide in New York.
As you know, there's enough room for everybody, even on our set. Cutter 97496, which I've long suspected is not his name at birth. Everybody is arguing about different wages. Go figure. Yeah. I mean, what is the issue right now? The issue is we don't have enough jobs in this country.
That's right. That's the issue. And New York City's trying to prevent Walmart from coming in. It's amazing.
But they are coming in. There are at least 10 stores that are coming into New York.
Well, New York City is what we're talking about. The city council had a faux hearing where, as if they were already here and we could regulate them, to talk about how we're going to keep them out under the guise that it was going to be a neutral hearing. They presented a study by Professor Merriman in Chicago, which I debunked in 5 minutes at the city council hearing. He had to backpedal and admit that Walmart had actually created more jobs than it had lost where it went in, and in fact that the wage issue was a non-issue because $8.02 was what the average person in these mom and pop shops was getting, and $11.55 is what they were getting at Walmart. So both their arguments that the wages would be substandard and that they destroyed jobs were both debunked in the first 10 minutes of the city council hearing.
Let's look at history, and that is with Walmart. Had they not had challenges in moving into...
Would you guys do me the favor of looking at history during the commercial break?
Sure.
And then the highlights we can give them right after this. Okay, we're going to look at history. Yep. We'll be right back. And it was a fine history lesson from David Mercer. All about the history of entitlements and everything else. And hey, I want to just get in a couple things from the live chat because we have some people chiming in from Wisconsin. Wisconsin, it went off the page. Anyway, well, I'll have to bring him back later. You had a quick retort for the president getting into what he calls union fray.
I did, and in the name of Fox's motto, fair and balanced. We've seen Pawlenty, no longer a governor. We know he's a presidential candidate, and if there's anybody that raised the issue of state budgets and unions, he'd be the champion. He's got it right on his forehead. So just as a presidential candidate has an opinion, so too does the President of the United States. And we are going to see a lot of people weighing in from congressional to the state level and what have you in all of this, just to put things in a little perspective.
Did that put it into perspective for you?
Absolutely not, but that's okay. That's okay. We'll agree to disagree because,
Okay. Charlie Ratty says, and apparently he must be in Wisconsin, Wisconsin Republicans, I think is what he means, gave millions in tax breaks to businesses a week ago, but now we're broke. Figure that out. There are people chiming in now from Wisconsin. If you're in Wisconsin, would you please put something out on the live chat so that we kind of know what your perspective is?
Well, let me just tell that guy.
This is pretty amazing.
The reporting is fun.
That Wisconsin is weighing in on this.
Do their jobs, and that's great. And I say fun because nobody's physically getting hurt in this.
That's right.
Although Curtis Marsh says, and when that happens,
send in the guard. There you go.
Big trouble. But it's always better to get it from the people on the ground.
Yeah, but you know what? That one comment, though, giving tax breaks to businesses. New York City learned the hard way when you don't do that, the businesses get up and leave. And when they leave, they don't only just go with the sales taxes that are lost, the revenue that's lost. They also go with the jobs. So let's be very careful. Okay. You don't want to scare away business at any cost.
All right, you guys sit tight for just a second. We want to get in Amy Kellogg right now because there is some breaking news. She is in our London bureau. And good morning, Amy. I understand that there are very dangerous situations now breaking out almost like a contagion away from Egypt and in other places of the Middle East right now. And I was reading just a short time ago on the Associated Press and Reuters wires that the death toll is climbing in some of these countries. What's the latest?
Yeah, Harris, today is Friday, which is the Muslim holy day, so often these days of rage become sort of gain momentum after Friday prayers, particularly if the imams whip people up, asking them to go out onto the street. So anyway, as you mentioned, there is contagion, Harris, and we sort of look day by day to see which country appears to be the biggest flashpoint. I think the pictures out of Libya have been the most dramatic. Libya and Bahrain, but let's talk about Libya first because that was a country that people didn't really expect there to be such unrest in, simply because it's a relatively small population, it's got a lot of money from oil and gas, and it's got an extraordinarily heavy-handed dictatorship. And so it was believed that things wouldn't spiral out of control there. They don't seem to be too hot in the capital, Tripoli, but in other cities there have been huge rallies. We've seen buildings set on fire, and there have been quite large casualties. Hard to confirm the numbers. I heard 24 in Libya, which is quite high. 24 people killed in these clashes. One eastern city by the name of Beta, apparently under control of the protesters. That's what they're saying now. Again, we can't confirm that. And Benghazi in the east has been a real flashpoint. The wealth in Libya actually not that well distributed, and it's in the east where you see greater poverty, so it's possible that it's all kicked off in that part of the country for that very reason. And then today also we saw protests in Jordan, the Hashemite kingdom of Jordan. Those have not been too heated, but the crowds looked bigger than usual today. Some of the protesters are calling for an end to the monarchy, although I spoke to one Jordanian colleague today who said that people are basically quite comfortable having a monarchy. They would just like it to be more democratic and more accountable to the people. Also in Jordan, you see, as in many of these countries, the government putting its own demonstrators out on the street. Part of that for PR, to make it look like the regimes are popular. Part of it somewhat provocative to have those people sort of go after some of the anti-government demonstrators. And then Bahrain, of course, has been tragic, with 4 people killed in the last 24 hours, or most of them actually in the early hours of Thursday. But their funerals took place today, Harris. People came out onto the streets in huge numbers, even though the military has said that no one has the right now to demonstrate. The military taking control of Bahrain for the first time, as far as most of the people I've spoken to can remember. So it's a very big deal. It's been a flashpoint all week, and we expect to see Bahrain continue to simmer in the coming days and possibly even weeks, Harris.
Wow. You know, Amy, something that really hit me was in one of those countries you mentioned that they're, and I think you said Jordan, they're comfortable with monarchy. They just want a democratic monarchy. I think I want to get them a dictionary.
Yeah, that's true. Doesn't really make sense, but I think that certainly there are ways of modifying the current system. Sure. I don't know. You know, people can't always say exactly what they think in these countries, so you're right about it being a complete contradiction, but there's also the issue of how forthcoming people will ultimately be.
All right, real quickly, because we don't have a lot more time with you, because we don't want to lose you off the satellite, Bird. What is the thread between all these countries? I mean, outside of the language that most of them share, what do they have in common?
Right. They're all Arabs, except for, of course, Iran, where we've seen demonstrations this week, too. But, yeah, I mean, some countries have very high rates of illiteracy. Others have a lot of oil. I mean, they are very different. Some have kings, and some just have presidents and presidents for life. But the one thing that seems to be uniting all of them is this sense that they want greater dignities, greater freedoms. We spoke to a very well-traveled and well-versed Middle East expert yesterday about all this, Harris, and here's what he had to say.
These protests that we're witnessing, from Bahrain to Libya to Egypt to Iran, they are all stitched together with one common thread, and that thread is dignity. What we are witnessing all across the region are people who are tired of their dignity being trampled upon by corrupt ruling elites, trampled upon by massive economic mismanagement, trampled upon by political repression and secret police states.
And Harris, we will be watching Iran closely in the next 24 hours or so, because there may be more student protests there this Sunday. Back to you.
Yeah, and we know it's illegal for them to even gather in that country.
Well, I wonder if our president will do the same types of supports this time around for the students in Iran that he chose to jump in Egypt and do. Because I remember a protest last year where we abandoned those students and didn't give them any sort of support, and now we've jumped in Egypt. And just to defend the monarchies.
Hold on one second. Let me wrap with Amy Kellogg. That was one of our guests on set. I'm going to release you. Thank you very much. We appreciate your reporting. You jumped right in there. And no, that's okay. But you make an interesting point. Let me let you finish it, and then we'll welcome Bob Beckel on.
And also, I want to just, England is a constitutional monarchy, so let's not throw the babies out with the bathwater.
Oh, interesting.
Okay, so when we talk about the fact that you can reconcile democracy and kingship, obviously in the United States that would never work. However, the English are doing just fine, as are the Danes and the Swedes. And
so you say give them a chance to try it.
Let's.
Well, I think one also the common bond in all of this is the lack of a developed middle class, and that with those freedoms come economic liberalization and development of a middle class, which is what everybody's seeking now to do.
Absolutely, because the rich are ultra rich and the poor are ultra poor.
And when you're at the extremes, you're going to get stress points until you get a middle class.
I put on the live chat that you are an interesting dude, Dan Halloran. You're very bright.
I had Jesuits to educate me from high school to college, so it was that's what did it to me.
Bob Beckel, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State and Fox News Channel contributor, joining us for Beckel for Breakfast on the phone right now. Good morning, Bob.
How are you, Harris?
I'm great. Now, you probably have heard, if you could hear the last few minutes of our conversation, some spirited talk from Dan Halloran, and I look forward. And, of course, David Mercer has been pushing toes with him too, but I look forward to seeing you guys go toe-to-toe on the union topic that's breaking out like wildfire in Wisconsin. Let me just throw in a live chat comment, and then you guys can take it away, Bob. Kathleen in Virginia writes, someone needs to explain jumping the shark to these unions. Citizens that work in the private sector are tired of paying for the public employee unions to receive benefits and salaries that they do not receive. Bob?
Well, first of all, let me say it's a pleasure to be with these enlightened gentlemen, and anybody who was educated by the Jesuits clearly has a big advantage over me. I was a football player and graduated 2.0001. But let me just also point out to you one place that I just couldn't almost jump through the phone when I heard about Walmart. I've been up against Walmart in several campaigns. The idea that Walmart does not cost jobs, I don't know who you debated out in Chicago, but the fact is in large metropolitan areas that may be true. In smaller metropolitan areas and certainly in suburban areas, it is not true. In Frederick, Maryland, when Walmart came in, there was a net loss of almost 800 jobs. So and I fought them in Walmart and we lost. And not only that, the union busters, they closed down one of their plants, one of their stores in Canada because they wouldn't have the
Meat Packers Union?
Packers Union be able to organize. They say they have health benefits for their employees. It's a bunch of bullshit. It is
whoa, hey!
No, I didn't say the whole word. So I don't get to Walmart with you now, but the idea that you can sit there and defend those jerks is beyond me, but that's all right.
Well, look, in major urban areas, that's not the case. The Chicago study actually proved there was a net gain of about 150 jobs. I'm just saying that in the cities, that's the case. And I don't think it's ever the role of government to tell a business where they can and can't go as long as they fit the zoning requirements for coming in. Now, New York State, as you probably know, and New York City in particular, have some of the most stringent labor laws and stringent protections of any state in the union. So if they did so much as peep the wrong way in New York, they would have the Attorney General, the State Department of Labor, the City Department of Labor all over them in a heartbeat, and they wouldn't be able to get away with any of the kinds of things that you're talking about.
All right, I have to say this because people are reacting to you, Bob. Apparently the union situation has you less than creative this morning, dropping the BS bomb. Are you worried as a Democrat that this is going to spread like contagion across the country? And maybe there are some mistakes, because David Mercer has brought them out this morning, that this governor in Wisconsin has made in terms of how he put together a package that would wipe away collective bargaining in the state of Wisconsin. But are you worried that maybe other Republican governors will learn from his mistakes and then put forth where you guys are going to be fighting in every state to save the unions?
We fought in every state to get a union, so it doesn't...
Go, Bob.
Did you cuss along the way? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, it was a much more civil time back then.
I was on a picket line and beat the hell out of them many, many times organizing unions. And I've been on the picket line with the United Mine Workers and almost got shot. So I got no fear of what a bunch of Republican yahoos have to say about it. The fact is, it's a union bashing. The fact is that everybody in this country who has 2 weeks paid vacation, whose kids don't have to work in sweatshops, who have some form of decency on the shop floor, and thank unions for it. Plain and simple. The idea that collective bargaining, it is a right. It's not a privilege, it's a right. And the fact is that you may not like what these unions got in their benefits, but they were contracts negotiated and signed, and contract law is very clear. If you're going to make a deal, stick with the deal. It's not the union's fault. Their job is to get the best deal they can get.
So then, of course, you have no problem when the contracts come up now of us gutting those contracts, right?
Because not gutting, renegotiating.
Well, renegotiating. And in this case, look, I think we're both in agreement that the governor maybe went a little too far in eliminating, all the collective bargaining. But I think there's also a big sentiment out there that you can't simply have binding arbitration that's going to impose conditions that neither side have negotiated for. for, and that's something that goes on, especially in municipal unions.
Look, there is a fundamental constitutional right to gather collectively and bargain to petition your government, to petition your worker, your employer, do whatever you want and get the best deal you can. You may not be able to get it.
Right.
If they want to change the rules, then that's something they can do, but they certainly cannot retroactively.
Would you also give them the right to work? In other words, so that they can opt out of being collectively bargained for? Do you agree that they should then not have to pay union dues if they choose not to be represented by a union? Are you in support of that?
Somebody who does not want to be in a collective bargaining agreement and he opts out and wants to keep his job, I have no problem.
Correct.
Oh, great. So New York should, I hope New York is listening, and the New York State government will take that into account and become a right-to-work state. That would be fantastic.
How many teachers in New York opt out?
About 35% have indicated that they would. So there you go. 35% of them don't want their union money going to the political PACs that they're going to.
They may 35% may not want to go into their PACs, but you said 35% don't want to be in the union. Now, if that's the case, which I think is absolutely absurd, you go ahead and put that before them and ask them if they want to single-handedly negotiate with their employer or they want to do it with their union, and it's nowhere near 35% would opt out of that.
So, okay, before I let you go, Bob, I want to put forth a couple of other points on the live chat. You know, there is one, and I'm not even going to paraphrase it because it gets me to the question. Is Obama going to send in his goons to Wisconsin from Jim? The question for me would be, does the president go to Wisconsin? Does he send somebody? What does he do about the situation?
I'm not so sure it's a bad idea to go to Wisconsin. I mean, I think that certainly somebody should go there. But, you know, the fact is that it's amazing to me that people are all of a sudden concerned about this when these collective bargaining agreements were signed, many by Republican governors. Some of the best union contracts are in Florida and Texas, which are two of the most Republican states in the union, at least Texas is. And the idea that somehow, because these guys got a good deal and now everybody else is hurting, it's the union's fault, is the height of hypocrisy. If you can't negotiate the best deal for yourself, then you shouldn't be negotiating. Retire.
If I can add to what Bob's saying, he's absolutely right. If you look at North Carolina, which is...
And the idea that this Wisconsin governor, he ought to be replaced by a scab.
All right. Whoa, I think Bob's phone went in and out there, but we got the last part. Yeah. Bob, I put this out on the live chat. I want you to wash your mouth out with soap. Yep.
At least put a lifesaver in it.
And that's from a fellow Democrat. Did you hear it? No, Bob Beckel, always good to have you in the morning. We appreciate it. You know what? Let's see what happens over the weekend. The Democrats say that they're not going to come back. Those senators are not going to come back until Saturday. What the heck is that going to look like? Bob Beckel joining us on the phone. Thank you very much. We are now going to talk the Middle East if we can, because we have someone joining us by phone. And because our guest, Dan Halloran, chimed up, which I didn't expect him to do in such fervor, I want to include him in this conversation. But one of my favorite people to interview is Waleed Faris. And he is joining us about how the protests are spreading across the Middle East. He's a Middle East expert and author of The Coming Revolution, Struggle for Freedom in the Middle East. And I tell you, if there were any other timely fashion that a book should be written, this guy hit it like the nail on the head. Dr. Faris, are you with us?
I'm with you. Thank you very much for having me this morning.
Absolutely. I'm not even going to ask you the first question. Dan Halloran is.
Oh.
Okay. Do you think that the revolutions that we're seeing are going to mirror the original Iranian revolution, which wound up putting us into a fundamentalist government in Iran? Because those were the educated intelligentsia of the collegiate and university crowds who wound up taking American hostages and compelling a revolution in an otherwise stable Shah system in the country.
Absolutely. There are some comparisons between the 79 Islamic Revolution and what's happening now, but there are a lot of differences. And the differences are interesting in the sense that there was no internet then. What was happening in Tehran during those moments was not actually known in the provinces or in other parts of Tehran. And the second thing is that these revolutions are happening across the region. They are hitting pro-American governments and the anti-American governments of Iran, potentially Syria, and even in Lebanon. In the pro-American government areas, you see two types of demonstrators. They are the ones who are the Muslim Brotherhood, the Islamists, and definitely, if they have the upper hand, gradually, they will transform, for example, Egypt into an Islamic emirate. Today we had Sheikh Yusuf al-Qaradawi, the mentor of the Muslim Brotherhood, delivering a fiery speech. That's one strong indication that that would be their trend. But on the other hand, you do have the young, educated, secular bloggers and demonstrators, women, minorities, who also have pushed against Mubarak and the other dictators. So my estimate is that in those countries, first, they're going to try to bring down the authoritarian regimes, then they're going to go against each other. Right. We're going to see a two segments play in those countries. In Iran, and I finish here, you're going to see a one segment. The opposition is actually secular, and the Islamists are in the regime.
So you're saying a bunch of civil wars break out. Boy, that is really frightening. David Mercer, what are your thoughts? Maybe you can interject a quick question.
What I'd love to ask Walid is, what do you think? We saw the great power of the Egyptian people, even eclipsing what has been raised as a specter, being the Muslim Brotherhood. What do you think they will need to continue in exercising that power that doesn't allow them to forfeit what everybody seems to be frightened about as it relates to the Muslim Brotherhood? What are they going to need going now past the fact that they did get Mubarak out to keep that going and keep possession of it in the interest of the Egyptian people?
May I say this is, one of the best questions of the day. It would apply to Egypt and to other countries, but let's focus on Egypt quickly. Numerically, from what we know, the 75% of all demonstrators from the first few days till Tahrir Square today, 75% are made of non-Muslim Brotherhood, of people of civil society, professionals, labor, all sorts of things, and 25% in the center of which you have the Muslim Brotherhood, probably 5 to 10%, and the rest are supporters, meaning people who are sympathizers. Now, the Muslim Brotherhood, we all know, are the best organized. They have been preparing for this for many, many decades. The other ones are dispersed, disorganized. But in Egypt, you have a triangle. In the center, you have the armed forces. They are the government. They're not very, knowledgeable about how to manage government. So there will be an expiration date. 5 to 6 months maximum. They cannot do more than that. Right. Meanwhile, what we can do, the United States and the international community, is to talk to the military and tell them, okay, we will continue supporting you, but you have to maintain a balance on the ground and maintain peace with Israel, of course, and everything. But at the same time, we need to engage as fast as we can with the NGOs of the secular forces. Women, students, bloggers, we need to do a fast-track work with them so that they could organize into quick unions and or political parties and go to the elections. And I would recommend that the elections will be on the later side of the 6 months, not on the earlier side of the 6 months.
All right, real quickly, previous guest has said that this is Egypt's Gandhi moment, that those protesters need a Gandhi to step up. 5 seconds. Throw out a name. Who's their Gandhi?
Well, I think the Gandhi they're talking about now is basically a fundamentalist one. The other one would be a very young one. That would be the Google guy, who doesn't want to be a Gandhi. Yes, who doesn't want to be a Gandhi, who can't be a Gandhi. So basically we are in a bind there between, as I said, as everybody said on the panel, the very organized minority and the disorganized majority.
Dr. Walid Farish, you have a lot of fans on our live chat.
Oh, thank you.
And so we appreciate you joining us, and they really, really love you. Thank you very much for joining us. I really want to have you back as we see what happens next in the Middle East. Let's let it cook, marinate like chicken over the weekend, and maybe bring you back next week, because it seems to change every 72 hours or so. On set this morning, really fun to have David Mercer and Dan Halloran. Really good to have you guys.
Pleasure to be here.
Absolutely.
And I want to have you both back as well. I just put out on the live chat, I like to have, especially when I have guys as smart as you on set, you guys interview the guests a little bit, because that also gives us your perspective on things, and you're very learned on these points. So thank you for letting me put you on the spot, both of you like that. Dan didn't even get saucers in his eyes. He's like, oh, you want me to interview this guy? I got no problem.
I was a criminal defense attorney. I was a prosecutor.
Okay,
so asking questions is right in my wheelhouse.
And I was a spin meister.
As a good Democrat should be.
Oh, woo! Goodness, they're still fighting. Okay, we're going to take a quick break. Gentlemen, thanks again. Come back.
Thank you. Have a good weekend.
We'll be right back.